So I've seen on the screen, on the big screen, three times Ryan Coogler's absolutely fascinating 2025 African American vampire film Sinners, right? And it was really fascinating. I understood America. I understood African American problems between 1775 and 8 to 1865. It was this horrific time in American history where we forced African Americans to labor for us, and which was abominable, right? But then, what this movie goes over is 1865 to 1935, right? Which was the Jim Crow era. And this was an era when it was not as bad as 1775 to 1865. There was a lot more opportunities for African Americans. But at this point, they went from being forced laborers, right, to sharecroppers. This idea that you would get a share of the crop, right? So you would pick cotton, and in the old days they just took everything you had picked and gave you nothing, right? And that was pretty abominable and really terrible. And now it was like you pick cotton and the white man is going to get the lion's share, but you're going to get a portion. You're going to get a share of the crop, right? And I think what's really interesting in Dungeons and Dragons, like every dungeon master should see this film and should be, and it should immediately raise this question of interim stories, right? So, yes, the Lich Lord came and they raised the dead and there was a war, right? And then the adventurers defeated them, right? But then, you know, like half the village, like half the men and half the women in the city of Neverwinter are dead, right? And so the immediate threat is solved, right? But now there's this period where, you're trying to restore Neverwinter and half the buildings are burnt husks and half the men are dead and half the women are dead. And there's, tension between elves and dwarves and humans, and there's this interim problem. And I will say, we told these simpler stories in the first 50 years of Dungeons and Dragons, but I think with the next 50 years we have an opportunity to tell these sharecropper stories, to say yes, 1775 to 1865 was horrible, but we've done movies that is covered, everybody understands it. Do you understand this next interim period? And that takes more mature dungeon masters, and that takes a lot more mature dragon masters to tell those stories. And it takes more nuance, and it takes more, difficulty, right? More rigor and more intent to tell these deeper meaning stories. But I think we've arrived at a place where we can, and Ryan Coogler's Sinners is an absolute perfect template to follow to accomplish this.